The rides were still running. That's the part most people don't know. After everything that happened, after the scandal, after the trial, after Michael Jackson walked off that property and never looked back, the Ferris wheel kept turning. The carousel kept spinning. The train kept making its loop around 2,700 empty acres. Staff showed up every morning. Ride operators clocked in, and there was nobody there. No visitors, no children, no Michael, just a $35 million private theme park running in complete silence in the hills above Santa Barbara, because someone had to keep it ready, just in case he came home. If that's the first time you've heard that detail, this channel is going to do something to you. Hit subscribe and come back every week. Now let's get into it. For 15 years, Neverland wasn't just a home. It was the most elaborate private amusement park ever built on American soil. $35 million in rides alone, a working zoo licensed by the state of California, a private cinema with red velvet seats, a train circling 2,700 acres on its own dedicated track, over 100 full-time staff maintaining every inch of it, every single day. Families sent letters begging for an invitation. Children who visited said it felt like stepping into a dream someone had somehow made real. And then Michael Jackson walked away from it. No dramatic exit, no farewell. After his acquittal in 2005, he told people he'd never live there again. And he meant it. Didn't collect his things, didn't say goodbye to the animals, didn't ride the train one last time. He just stopped returning. And the staff kept showing up. The rides kept running. The zoo kept being fed. That's the part most people glossed over. Everyone was focused on the scandal, the trial, the headlines. But there's a version of this story that's never been told completely. What happened to Neverland after Michael Jackson abandoned it? What happened to the rides, the animals, the buildings, the land itself? Was handled very quietly, very deliberately, and some of it was handled in a way the people involved clearly hoped nobody would fully piece together. By the end of this video, I'll show you one specific piece of Neverland, something physical, something from the park itself, that was auctioned off after his death. Most people missed it completely, and where it ended up is one of those details that, once you know it, you won't quite be able to shake. To understand how a theme park ends up abandoned in the hills of Santa Barbara, you have to go back to 1987, and you have to understand what Michael Jackson was at that moment in time. He was 29 years old, worth an estimated $100 million, the most recognizable face on the planet. Thriller had already sold 66 million copies. The Bad Tour was about to launch, a 123-show world tour that would earn 2 Guinness World Records, the largest grossing tour in history and the largest attended audience ever. He was untouchable, he was everywhere, and he was completely, profoundly alone. He'd been famous since he was 6, he'd never had a normal childhood, never rode a bike down a quiet street, never had a summer that felt like a summer. Fame at that level takes everything, and it took everything from him early. So in March 1988, he spent $19.5 million on a 2,700-acre ranch in the Santa Ynez Valley, about 30 miles north of Santa Barbara. Beautiful, private, empty. He didn't buy it to live quietly. He bought it to build something. He renamed it Neverland Valley Ranch, taken directly from Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up. He wasn't being ironic, he meant it completely. This was going to be the childhood he never got, built from scratch, on 2,700 acres, with no budget ceiling and nobody telling him no. He poured $35 million into the amusement park alone, a custom-built train system, the Neverland Valley Railroad, with its own station, its own track, its own uniformed conductor, a hand-painted carousel, a Ferris wheel visible from the highway, a zipper, a scrambler, bumper cars, a roller coaster. Then the zoo, giraffes, elephants, orangutans, flamingos, a chimpanzee named Bubbles, who once accompanied Michael to meet the mayor of Osaka on an official visit to Japan. Then the movie theater, 50 red velvet seats, a candy counter stocked fresh daily, then 50,000 square feet of gardens, a living floral clock, rose beds, wisteria. Every Christmas, an estimated 50 million lights on the main house, visible for miles. On June 3rd, 1988, he opened the gates for the first time. The first guests weren't celebrities. They were underprivileged children bussed in from Los Angeles, kids who'd never been to a theme park, kids who had no idea what they were about to walk into. That was just the beginning. But here's something most people don't realize about Neverland. It wasn't just a private playground. It was a fully licensed, state-regulated amusement park. California treated it exactly like Disneyland. Annual inspections, certified ride operators, documented maintenance logs, which meant the rides had to be staffed every single day. On most days, nobody was visiting. No guests, no children, no Michael. But the ride operators still clocked in. The Ferris wheel still turned. The train still made its loop, conductor in uniform, right on schedule, with absolutely nobody on board, because Michael Jackson's standing instructions were simple. Keep everything running, keep everything ready, just in case. Think about what that means financially. Full operating costs for a theme park running at zero capacity, day after day, month after month, for years. That detail matters, because it's the reason Neverland was already bleeding money long before anything went wrong. We'll come back to that. But first, you need to understand what this place actually felt like when it was alive. Throughout the early 1990s, Neverland wasn't just a property, it was a myth. The place people whispered about at dinner parties. The place where, if you were lucky enough to get an invitation, you walked through those gates and felt like the normal rules of the world didn't apply here anymore. The train picked you up at the entrance station, real platform, uniformed conductor, your name already known. It pulled out slowly, and for several minutes you just moved through it, oak trees and manicured gardens rolling past. The property so large you couldn't see where it ended. Most guests said nothing on that first ride. They just looked. You'd hear the carousel before you saw it. That specific bright, slightly melancholy sound of a fairground organ drifting through the trees. Then you'd come around a bend, and there it was. Full-size, hand-painted horses turning in the California sunshine. The zoo sat just past the rose garden. You'd sense it before you saw it. A low rumble, the smell of hay. Then the giraffes would come into view, standing in the open air in the middle of Santa Barbara County, completely unbothered. And your brain would take a moment to accept that this was real, that this was someone's backyard. There was a candy shop stocked fresh every day, a floral clock made entirely of living plants, a movie theater where the popcorn was always free, and Michael would stay long after the last guest left, watching films alone upstairs in the dark. Every Christmas, the main house wore an estimated 50 million lights. Staff spent weeks putting them up. Michael would stand outside and just look. It was, by every account from everyone who visited, genuinely impossible. Not just expensive, impossible. Elizabeth Taylor, who attended her own wedding at Neverland in 1991, called it the most magical place she'd ever seen. For one decade, it was exactly what Michael Jackson said he wanted it to be. The childhood he never got. Built in steel and concrete and carousel horses and Christmas lights. It was perfect, and it was already running out of time. But there was a problem, and it had been there almost from the beginning. Neverland cost an estimated $5 million a year just to maintain. Staff wages, animal care, ride certification, seasonal replanting, all of it running whether Michael was there or not. And Michael was almost never there. He was on tour, in studios, in hotel rooms on 3 continents. The ranch ran like a small city with no residents. In 1990, that was manageable. Dangerous was about to sell 32 million copies. A $5 million overhead felt like nothing. By 1993, it felt like something else entirely. Then came the summer of 1993. That was when Evan Chandler's family made allegations of child sexual abuse against Michael Jackson, triggering a criminal investigation by both the LAPD and the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office simultaneously. The story broke publicly within weeks. and it became the only story anyone was telling about him. The criminal case was eventually dropped. A civil lawsuit was settled out of court on January 25, 1994, for $23 million. Michael denied any wrongdoing. His insurance company negotiated the settlement over his own objections. But it didn't matter what the legal reality was. The public had already decided. Endorsements disappeared. His decade-long Pepsi deal was canceled. The cultural air around Neverland shifted permanently. The Ferris wheel was the same. The carousel was the same. But something had changed in the atmosphere around it that never quite changed back. He still returned, still kept the rides running, still wasn't ready to let go. But the costs didn't stop. The income started to. The cracks weren't spreading anymore. They were splitting open. Most people who tell this story stop at the scandal. They blame the 2003 charges. They say Michael Jackson abandoned Neverland because the police showed up, and that's part of it. But by the time those 70 deputies pulled up to the gates in November 2003, the property was already in serious financial trouble. Staff count reduced. Several animals already relocated. Neverland wasn't a thriving paradise destroyed by a scandal. It was an operation hemorrhaging money for years. And the scandal was the final push on something already tipping over. The 2003 raid didn't kill Neverland. It just finished what was already dying. On November 18, 2003, 70 Santa Barbara County Sheriff's deputies arrived at Neverland with a search warrant. They were there for 14 hours. They moved through every building: the house, the theater, the candy shop, the train station, the zoo. They took computers, photographs, DVDs. They cataloged the private interior of a world Michael Jackson had spent 15 years and tens of millions of dollars building. He was in Las Vegas when it happened. He never came back. Not to collect anything, not to check on the animals, not to ride the train one last time. Following his acquittal on all charges on June 13, 2005, not guilty on every single count, he told the people around him clearly he would never live at Neverland again. He didn't celebrate there. He didn't go back to say goodbye. He just never returned. The staff kept showing up for a while. The rides kept running on operational momentum. The Ferris wheel turned. The carousel played its music into empty California air. The train made its loop with nobody on it. Then, it all stopped. By February 2008, Neverland was in default on a loan of over $24.5 million. Jackson received notice that unless the full amount was paid by March 19th, the property, the land, the buildings, the rides, the train would go to public auction. On May 12, 2008, the foreclosure auction was canceled after Colony Capital purchased the defaulted loan. Jackson's name remained connected to the property, but Neverland was no longer really his. The zoo was empty, the animals were gone, the rides were fenced off. The carousel that had played music loud enough to hear from half a mile away made no sound at all. The train sat at the station, going nowhere. On June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson died in Los Angeles from acute propofol intoxication. He was 50 years old. He'd spent months rehearsing a comeback tour, 50 shows at the O2 Arena in London, working 18-hour days getting ready. He never mentioned going back to Neverland. In 2020, the property sold for $22 million to billionaire investor Ron Burkle. He'd spent $35 million on the amusement park alone. They kept the name Sycamore Valley Ranch, the name the property had before Michael ever bought it. The rides were gone by then. The train tracks pulled up. The zoo enclosures removed. Every physical trace of Neverland erased from the property. It took surprisingly little time. And remember what I told you at the beginning about one specific piece of Neverland quietly auctioned off after his death? Following Jackson's passing, the contents of Neverland were cataloged and dispersed. Among them were the carousel horses, the actual hand-carved horses from the working carousel that had been the centerpiece of the park for 15 years. They were sold at auction individually. Most went to private collectors who paid quietly and took them home. That's what becomes of $35 million worth of childhood. Hand-carved carousel horses, sold off one by one, a private zoo dismantled, a train pulled off its tracks, and 2,700 acres of California hills with a different name. Today, Sycamore Valley Ranch sits quietly from the outside. The hills, the oak trees, the long driveway disappearing into the property, the main house still standing. If you drove past on Figueroa Mountain Road right now, you'd see a beautiful, peaceful piece of California countryside. You'd have no idea what used to be there. The Ferris wheel is gone. The carousel is gone. The train tracks pulled up. What's left of the amusement park is concrete pads in the grass, slowly being reclaimed by the ground around them. Neverland lasted 15 years at its peak. It took less than a decade after Michael walked away for it to become completely unrecognizable. Here's the thing that's hardest to sit with. It wasn't just a place, it was proof that one person, if they wanted something badly enough, could build a world from scratch. Different rules, different light, a world where a hand-painted carousel turned in the oak trees and underprivileged children from Los Angeles could spend a day somewhere that felt like it existed outside of time. He built it because nobody gave him a childhood, so he built one himself. And then the money got complicated. The world turned on him, and he never went back. Not because he forgot it. The people closest to him said he thought about Neverland constantly in his final years. That losing it was something he carried every single day. He just couldn't go back to a place the world had spent a decade trying to make him ashamed of. So it sat, and it emptied, and it was sold and quietly erased by people who had no use for what it used to mean. A man built the thing he needed most in the world, and then the world took it from him. If this story hit you the way it hit me researching it, subscribe. There are dozens of places like Neverland, private kingdoms built by extraordinary people, abandoned quietly, slowly erased. I cover one every week. The next video is on screen right now, and if Neverland meant something to you growing up, tell me in the comments. I read every single one.